Hello and welcome to Regent Leadership Live. My name is Kylie Hazeldine and I will be your host for what is the third in our series of episodes to look at leadership challenges and how we can tackle them. We're changing things up a little bit this week. Our topic is transformational leadership, and so my usual co-host is actually going to be one of our guests. So I'm joined today by our Director of Regent Leadership, Colin. Welcome. And also John Legg, who's Chief Operating Officer of Gecko Labs. Welcome. Obviously, as usual, you can engage in the conversation by using the hashtag ExecEdEduTV, and you can do that across all our social media platforms. And hopefully, on my own, without Colin's assistance, I will put the questions to our guest and also host. So, guys, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your experience in this space of leadership. Starting with you, Colin.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, it's nice to be on the other side of the sofa this week, Kylie. Basically, my context is before coming to Regent, I'd worked a hell of a lot in change management and understanding communications and how to transform organisations. I started Bounce UK, which is, hopefully you might have tried our bounce balls, which I kind of started probably about 10 years ago, which transformed the food market. So yeah, an idea about transformation in many forms, hopefully.
Okay, thank you. And John, what about yourself?
Well, I'm the COO of Gecko Labs, which is a software company startup, we like to call ourselves. We've been around for about 4 years now, based in Edinburgh and London. And we've got a team of 23 people at the moment. And we like to think that our vision, if you like, is to create superhuman software. So everything we do is for our customers, for our universities and student recruitment teams there. My background is fairly varied. I spent 25 years in advertising, working for television companies like Scottish TV, and then I latterly entered the radio market. So working with big teams in radio for a company called Chrysalis, which nobody really knows about apart from the fact that Blondie was one of our stars. And we had many #1 hits in the 1970s and 80s, but latterly we started Heart FM, which you probably all know,
Yes.
and Galaxy and LBC and so on. That became global radio, and now I'm in the education space.
Okay. So our topic today is transformational leadership. So obviously we talk about leadership each week on this show, but what does transformational leadership mean to you? Colin?
I think when we kind of talk about transformational, there's almost 3 subjects that come to mind because it's a very large area, but I think firstly individual, so how do you transform yourself and take kind of new ideas on board, which is that kind of one area of transformational leadership. Then it's about teams, so therefore it's how do you transform the people around you and put new ideas to them, new ways of working and that kind of thing. And then wider, which is from an organisational point of view. So that's kind of how do you transform an organisation and move that forward, particularly in the kind of current market of the world changing every day. So the world is transforming, so we need to transform our organisations in the same way. So I think it's a huge area in many ways, but thinking in those terms, that's the way I was kind of trying to break it down, because each of those has its kind of things to talk about, basically.
Okay. What about yourself? When we say transformational leadership, what does it mean to you, John?
I think I'm probably less academic than Colin in that respect, in terms of my definition. But from my perspective, I think probably most leaders who lead companies think they're transformational leaders, and they are the inspiration and the drive of the company. They probably don't really understand what that means, and they may not be transformational leaders. But as a lead of a company, you need someone to drive that company forward and develop change to meet the marketplace. If you take it in the context of everything that's going on, there's many different types of leadership, and I think in reality those guys who think they're transformational leaders are probably autocrats or democrats or these kind of things, and that might be the part of leadership that's missing. So for me, I think transformational leadership it really reflects the people who drive a company forward and develop that company with passion, I think, and then the other leaders probably execute that passion.
Okay. So why is transformational leadership so important? You touched on some of the conversations maybe that we've had in the previous episodes, the rapid change, the 4th industrial revolution. So Why do we need transformational leaders today?
I think it's to react to where we are and think that it's not a case of doing one thing and doing that for the rest of your career. I think that's as you were saying, it's just taking those ideas and how do we be aware of what we are. Interesting, you were talking about some people think they're transformational and they're actually not. The people who are just kind of thinking this is the way it should be done are probably more in that space, and the people who have a natural way about them. And I think the interesting thing that we talk about is it's helping people that might not be natural at this to take on new ideas and think, how do you develop into some of these traits that there are great transformational leaders already. I was having a conversation the other day about Nelson Mandela. So you think about a transformational on so many levels. That's the kind of thing. It's actually almost for the rest of us who aren't those special people to take on some of the skills. How do we model some of this? How can I develop myself into take on some of those skills? I think that's the kind of thing to think about, really.
Yeah, I would say things have changed as well. So why do we need it now? It's just the huge raft of communication that exists in the workplace and in the industry and in the world. Because when I started working many years ago, so 30 years ago, I worked in an office and there were people around me. There were managers who told me what to do. Those managers reported to managers, and there was a figurehead who probably wasn't a leader really, but was just somebody who ran the company. And the company existed in those days because it manufactured a product and managed to retail those products, or it managed to sell those into other services. Now you see these companies that emerge, and you have to have an identity, and you have to have principles, and you have to have a vision, so that people can identify with your company now. And often you see companies that do well are those companies that can deliver that. Those companies do badly aren't really catering for that kind of communication that is needed now in the workplace and in industry.
So taking that point forward a little bit, so what are some of those kind of skills and behaviours that you need to be a transformational leader? Colin?
It's interesting taking your point there. I think it's one of the things we talk about often is telling stories. That idea of often when you see classic leadership, we need to have a vision about these things, we need purpose. Great, fantastic, and I think the marketing team will be able to do that for you. But then how do you communicate that to the people that you're working with? How do you communicate that to the organisation and the market in front of you? So to be able to how do I make it real and vary that story depending on who you're talking to? Because often, as we're having now a conversation, you need to listen to people and be able to fit a story to their view of the world. So how do we apply whatever we do into someone else's world? So I think, 30 years ago we had things, we sold glasses, we sold teacups, and we said, this is exactly what we need to do, this is dead easy. Whereas now it's, what can this glass give me? What fantastic user experience is this glass going to give me? And if you don't have that story, and if you can't communicate in those ways, you don't survive in the marketplace, because people will go on to the next story, because it's more about an emotional attachment to services and products rather than simply, here it is, you've got to have this, go and buy it for 48 pence. So it's that kind of thing,
I think Branson had quite a good stance at the beginning, which was he has a story about having long hair and being pretty disrespectful to people, and he tells that over and over and over again. Behind the scenes though, what I see in him is that he has a real empathy with people, he understands the business, he understands what people want. So, I imagine, I've never met him, but if I take this to people that I've worked with in the past, the real leaders completely understand their staff, and they care about their staff, and they want to develop their staff and give them the ability to change. The leaders that I disrespect the most are the people who are completely disconnected with what's going on in the business and can't actually deliver that empathy to their staff. So I think if the staff know that their chief executive, that their COO, whoever it may be, has a connection to them, understands their role, understands what they do, understands how they work within the general alignment of their company, then that's something that they can respect and that they can lead. So, out with the company, I think it's important to have a brand, if you like. Within the company, it's important to be recognised and understood, and for them to understand you.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's being able to adapt your style to a variety of people. So, so therefore you get good conversations happening with people, and so therefore you connect with people, which again, almost moving on to why is it important for building organisations. It's if you don't connect with people, they will leave, because a lot of the newer generation coming into the workforce, we talk about kind of when we started 30 years ago, it was a job. Now it's where am I going to be for the next couple of years? What's going to develop me in a direction where I want to go? So I think that those kind of conversations are really interesting, because if you don't engage people, then they'll just go somewhere else a lot quicker.
We're finding out where am I going in 6 months' time. They're saying where am I going to be now?
That's
what's my next progression?
Yeah.
And these are guys who come straight out of college with a degree, and they've got ambition, and they're questioning immediately what their career path is. And if it's not good enough,
they'll go somewhere else.
They'll leave. And I think that the fact that the workforce is so transient now and they can make choices has shifted the power, quite considerably in favour of the employee. I quite like that. I think that's that means that management leaders have to understand that and deliver the agreement, which is that if you give us your time, then we'll develop you. And where that works, it's so powerful. And when it doesn't work, you see huge turnover rates, and low satisfaction, and low productivity, and less success.
And I think it's like you say, we've only almost started that part of the curve, because as that becomes endemic in all of industry, rather than thinking, oh, that's the newer generation coming through, then organisations and people will just not survive. They'll just wither away. And of course, with all the pace and the connectivity and being able to work anywhere, all this kind of stuff will just disappear, because we'll go work with people, almost not for people. We'll work with people that interest us and help us grow. And so if that's not there, then we're just going to go on to the next thing. Hence, engaging with those kind of people is so important.
So it comes full circle, really. So transformational leadership is about transforming yourself as a leader, transforming your organisation, but what you've both kind of come around to is about how it's about transforming the individuals in your teams and within your organisation. So it's that kind of triangle there. We do have a question from social media. I've managed to keep a little bit of an eye on that. And they're asking, obviously, as a CRO of a successful company, you've talked about how important it is to be understand your staff and be connected with your staff. What kind of advice do you give, or how do you go about doing that on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so it's easy for us because we are 23, and whilst we're disconnected in only one form, which is that we have a London and Edinburgh office, it's quite easy to gauge the temperature of the sentiment and understand the staff. For me, I speak to them as equals, and try and understand what they're doing, and try and understand their personality, because everyone's different, right? Yeah. When it gets, and even within that, within small companies, you can find there are communication problems. There are all sorts of issues that arise that you can't even imagine were there in the first place. So it's a constant effort to keep in touch with staff and to understand what their challenges are and to get feedback. Within big companies, it's very difficult, I think. Being able to get that feedback from staff is difficult, and you have to rely on your management team to give you that effectively. So it's no good being a transformational leader and having a management team who are autocrats or who are laissez-faire, who feel that people should do their work. If that's the kind of ethos you have in your company, you have to spread that kind of inspiration, if you like, to the managers to get that feedback.
And building on that, I think it's the two things that come to mind when you were talking about that. It's often the opportunity for leadership is create more leaders. And so therefore, actually, once you've kind of done it for 20 people, how do you then spread that message and spread that positive style throughout an organisation? And so therefore, it's like, how do you create more? How do you pass on that and pass on those skills and encourage people in that kind of way of working? But one of the things you were talking about, just the first part of that paragraph was listening. That's the thing that so many people miss, and I think leadership is often this idea of I need to be at the front, I need to be the one on stage, I need to be at the talking all the time. Whereas actually, hearing what you said, it's I need to be listening, because that's how I can understand where you are and fit something according to you and help you. So yeah, I think we talk about it a hell of a lot, but it's one of the things that is so rarely or little taught and understood is really good listening skills. And so therefore it's being able to hear people, really understand them, and then fit the conversation to that and support them.
That sounds like quite a challenge in terms of kind of time invested in people and listening to people and being connected to your staff. And obviously, 23 is a lot of people. That's, maybe a few hours a week per them, but there's a lot of other things you're expected to do as a leader. We've talked about how you transform the organisation. I think on previous episodes we've talked about the importance of planning and strategy and those kind of things. So how do you balance making the time for the people in your organisation and being an inspirational leader, but also creating a pathway and a vision that inspires them? John, any thoughts?
Well, I think having a connection with staff doesn't mean that you're having meetings with them and that you're formalising the process. Although there's certainly a place for underpinning that and making sure that everything is being covered. But as I said, with a small team, it's quite easy to spend time with them over lunch or making coffee or whatever it is, and actually show an interest. And a lot of the time, what you'll find is that junior members of staff won't want to talk to you because they fear you in some way, or they think they shouldn't, or they don't want to expose themselves. But I think once you create that openness, then it's much easier. And of course, you've got to do your day job, and that's very important. But part of your day job is communicating the vision to the staff. So if you can do that in those small episodes, then that's fine. But the day job is important, but the people who are going to do that for you are the staff. So that's as equally important as your operational role.
Yeah, I see it really interesting where almost culturally we have to shed this idea of where we're still in an industrial society, which is doing tasks and making things, and that's our primary thing, and then all the people, you might have to keep them happy. Whereas actually I think now it's the other way around. It's the kind of how do you have the people side of this first, and then if you can then do operational stuff as well, great. But if you want to really have the primary task of engaging people, that's where you should be. It's kind of spending time. We were talking the other day about the time spent between leadership, management and operations, and the challenge often is when you ask people on the courses that we do, they go, oh yeah, I should be 70-20-10 leadership, and often it's the other way around. And you go, well actually, that's almost the first challenge. How do you spend your time in a way that's going to move things forward rather than do the things that you've always done? Because I think when you talk about transformational and having new skills, the skills that got you to where you are not always the skills that will be useful going forward. So sometimes we come up with almost a functional pipe on our career progression, and then suddenly people say, well, you've got to now lead and manage teams, and it's like, oh, I've just got to keep all the task balls in the air and speak to people. Whereas actually now, no, it's a different kind of work that you need to do. And what we try and do is help people navigate that kind of behavioural change as well as just the time change, really. Yeah.
Definitely. Now, when we get new managers, not necessarily at Gecko, so I've worked with them in the past, and they get a team of people, and they're chuffed to bits. That is I've made it now. I'm in charge of people. So what I'm going to do is tell them what to do. I'm going to make sure they do a good job, and I'm going to measure them. And I'm going to have a one-to-one and tell them what to do and measure them. And so then what happens is that team becomes unhappy, and the manager becomes a little bit disenfranchised, and it's because we haven't supported them. So, and I think that everybody has a different management style, in my view, and not everyone can take the different styles. They just have to figure out what's best for them and make that work, in my view. So if you're someone who's not comfortable with having to be inspirational and positive all the time, then you might have to be more operational. You might have to slip more into a role where you're just executing the plan and somebody else is giving the inspiration and you're right behind them and supporting them. If you are an autocrat, you somehow have to make that work, and you have to be aware of yourself. And so all of these things need to be taken into consideration when you've got the people who are following you. And then, but the first thing is to think, what kind of manager am I going to be, and what kind of manager can I be, before you start thinking, I'd like to be an inspirational manager.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's taking that an idea of self-awareness of who am I, what am I good at, what are my strengths, etc. So you kind of know where you are, and then think, actually, how can I expand out of that to have more flexibility? I'm not suddenly going to be, if you've come up through, I was speaking to someone the other day, come up through accountancy or law or something like that, you're not suddenly going to turn into Richard Branson. It's not going to happen, because it's not your personality. So it's understanding where you are, and then how you can flex on that, and understanding, well, actually, I'm not great at that, so how can I achieve that with maybe someone else in the team, or achieve it a different way? So it's that kind of awareness of understanding all the aspects, and then going, I'll play here, and we still need to achieve this as well. So yeah,
it's interesting though. Do you think anyone could be an inspirational manager or?
Not inspirational. I think it's that authenticity is talked about a lot. So if you're really being yourself, and you kind of doing what you believe in, and have that self-awareness, I know I'm not great at this, and so therefore that actually showing that bit of, not weakness but vulnerability. I think that gets a load of credit with people, because suddenly they see you as a human being, not just your manager or leader or whatever.
So you talked about kind of transforming the self and transformational leadership, and that recognition that you might have come up as a lawyer, and you need to be a leader. Nothing wrong with law graduates.
No, I'm not an ex-lawyer.
I'm a law graduate.
I'm an ex-dentist.
I'm a law graduate, so we can be dynamic and interesting leaders. I hope to be a testament to that. But how then, if you've identified, okay, I want to take on this challenge, how do you then develop yourself as a leader? What kind of support and systems do you put in place for yourself? John, you've probably done that quite recently, kind of taking on that kind of title and role.
Yeah, for me, I don't see myself as an inspirational leader. I see myself as a very positive force, and I'm probably a Democrat, if it was the truth to be told. And that has positives and negatives. A Democrat in a crisis, I'm probably not the best person to be around, because I'll probably need to take advice on things. But what I try and do is take the traits of the people that I know are inspirational leaders, and copy them if I can. And that's not easy to keep up with, but I do that. So I take from other people, and I try and recognise my strengths and weaknesses. But then I read, so you have to read about how other people deal with these situations. You have to make yourself as good a leader as you can under the circumstances of your own ability. So I'm never going to be Richard Branson, although I'd like to be. But I think I can be a good leader in the way that I can lead, if you see what I mean. But the first thing is to recognise that you can't just step into leadership. You have to try and work at it in some way, and just improve yourself all the time. Hey?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm taken back what you were saying with when I used to manage and lead project teams, and I used to work in the software industry as well, and we had really tough deadlines. We're going live, in two days. We've got to get all the code sorted, and I know my natural thing is I don't want to fail on this, and so I get very direct. And so therefore, but I think it's then being aware of that, okay, outside of those things, how can you kind of do the other stuff as well, rather than being a force or a directive force all the time. So, well, I know in stress, this is my natural way, because this is my value set. It's what you do when the stress is that, how do you make up for the other stuff? So you have a broad range of things, rather than going, I know my style when we're under stress, but how can I work in the other times to be more adaptable, and those kind of things. And everyone's different, but I just think that was kind of my, I knew I was kind of, come on, we've got to do this, we've got to do it. Whereas, how can I then support the team? When we're all finished, I went, great, let's buy some drinks, make up for the time, be more caring at those kind of times. So I had the full stretch of those kind of things, rather than thinking, oh no, I'm not all directive, and once we've finished this, let's go and find the next mountain. So yeah.
And then the last thing is you've got to get feedback. So whatever form that takes, you have to get some honest feedback about what you like, because if you don't get that feedback, you can never get better. And the feedback's got to come from your team, whether that's 360s, whether that is independent assessments of what's going on, whether that's just having one-to-ones and ask people to speak freely if they can. the only way you can get better and the only way you can motivate the team is to understand what your weaknesses are. And then you have to take that feedback honestly and say, okay, fair enough, I need to change, or you know, how can I adapt so that I can make that a positive thing rather than a negative thing.
We do quite a bit of coaching to Regent Leadership. Why do you think that is effective for somebody who's on this kind of journey to kind of become a transformational leader, if they can ever reach that goal?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of the points you've talked about already. I think one of the other things when you talk about coaching, when we do it, is it helps people apply the knowledge. So if you're trying to learn and all these kind of things, it then encourages people to regularly get feedback, regularly look at themselves and also apply it to what they're doing, to almost take a risk to go, let's apply this stuff. Because often when people start on the journey, they go to courses or whatever, and what happens, they have a fantastic couple of days away and it's really transformational for them and whatever, and then they go back to their environment and it doesn't change because they go back into the routine. But with coaching support, I think that then gives them to some assistance and support and almost feeds them back into that feeling that they got. And so it's on a number of ways. So it's supportive, it helps them, it reminds them, it keeps them accountable as well, and all those kind of things. So that support as well as the you know, new knowledge and understanding is really, really important. And that's, you know, in previous conversations, that's after they've gone through it, they realised without that I would have not made as much progress as I hadn't.
And I don't think you realise how unconfident sometimes those confident leaders are.
Absolutely.
That you aspire to be. And so, you know, you just expect them to be able to do everything for you and to be able to take it, you know, take it in their stride. But quite a lot of the time I've met managers who are completely terrified of what's happened, but they're not prepared to admit it, so they can't get any better. So, you know, as an example, I remember when I first became a manager, I delegated everything. It was great. But then I was left with the question, what do I do now? You know, what is my role in this company? Because I've delegated everything and I think I've done a great job in that. Should I just go to lunch? Am I going to get found out? And so it's how to actually act in a more senior way and apply value to the company once you've done that, and you know what your value really is to the company, as opposed to what you're doing day to day, really.
Yeah.
That's nice to hear, and I think that's kind of a nice note to finish on. You know, leaders are human beings too, and you know, we all have insecurities, and also I think, you know, behind every great leader there probably is a coach or a development program or a book that they're reading that is helping them on that journey, and hopefully that's what we're doing with what we're doing here and in the leadership community. Okay, well, thank you very much. That is all we've got time for. So that just leaves me to say thank you to our guests, and I hope you'll join us on our next episode, which is talking about unleashing the capabilities of teams. And of course, you can send us questions for our guests on that topic on #ExecEdTV. And we will see you next time.
I think we need to protect something that we've had in the UK for a long time. Actually, it used to be that you didn't have to have a degree to go into technology, and suddenly people have started to put on job descriptions, technology, you know, need for a degree. We used to have degree or equivalent experience, and I work with people who've got zoology degrees, economics degrees, been apprentice shipbuilders, you know, worked in engineering. We need to make it open for anyone. I think actually that's where the pressure comes in. We pressure people to make a choice at 16. We need to look at how we can get them interested younger, but also how we can allow people to move into it and retrain from other areas. So it doesn't have to be, it's not like being a lawyer. There shouldn't be one route to success here. And if you have that one route to success, then you affect diversity, because you have to interest people younger, where they may not be interested, whether that's because of their background, where they live, or, you know, whether they're of an ethnic minority or whether they're a woman. You know, if you've got that start earlier, people haven't decided what they want to do. If you can actually do that later, make it easy for people to make moves across, I think we'll end up with a stronger, more diverse industry.